Did you know that hundreds of thousands of American kids are trafficked every year, but only 1% are ever identified? Every year, Pest Management Professionals service millions of homes and businesses. You are the eyes and ears of the community, and you can make a difference. Forshaw partnered with Safe House Project to develop a free 30-minute training video that was written by human trafficking survivors who saw in-home service providers during their time being trafficked. Those survivors share their personal experiences to equip you on how to spot, report, and prevent trafficking where you live, work, and play. Forshaw challenges you to join our volunteer army and help us exterminate trafficking. Go to our website to take the training and become a partner in freedom today. Together, we can save lives.
Hi, my name is Christy Wells, and I'm the CEO of Safe House Project. We're a national leader in the fight against child sex trafficking in America, and we are here as your guide to help you learn about this industry and how you may intersect it in your day-to-day work, and how you have the ability to respond when you see something. After completing the On Watch training, you will be uniquely positioned to spot, report, and prevent sex trafficking of children across America. On behalf of the child sex trafficking survivors we serve, I want to say thank you. Thank you for being on watch to protect one of the most vulnerable populations in our communities. To begin understanding sex trafficking, we need a clear definition. It's important to understand that trafficking does not always mean moving a person from where they reside. Simply put, sex trafficking is the commercial sexual exploitation of an individual through force, fraud, or coercion. But a child is considered a victim of sex trafficking anytime they're forced into commercial sex, whether that's prostitution or pornography. Globally, sex trafficking is a $99 billion industry, and while it's easy to envision that as something that only happens in third world countries, the United States is in the top 3 nations in the world for trafficking. While it is rampant, it is also far less visible. Sex trafficking happens behind closed doors, and victims, while not always in shackles, are in bondage to their trafficker, and we have a chance to help set them free. Here is a glimpse into the life of one child sex trafficking victim.
My innocence was stolen at the tender age of 6 by my stepdad. For 5 years, as my mom traveled for work, he trafficked me right from my childhood home, selling my body to his clients. My childhood bedroom was my nightmare. My chains weren't metal links, no, but I was controlled. I was confined. I was dehumanized. Every night I cried myself to sleep, as I longed for someone to finally see me and report what was happening behind closed doors.
For this survivor, her story began at 6 years old. It's important to understand that child sex trafficking can happen at any age. Safe House Project has seen cases involving infants, toddlers, elementary age, middle school, and high school age kids, but the average age a child starts to be trafficked is about 12 years old. But when we're able to recognize victims at a young age, it provides an opportunity for identification. However, rescue is only part of the equation. Without opportunities for healing, 80% of victims that are rescued end up being re-victimized. With hundreds of thousands of Americans being victimized each year, it's important to understand that currently, victim identification is only at 1%, leaving 99% of victims hiding in plain sight. By taking the On Watch training, you are equipping yourself with the knowledge to spot, report, and prevent child sex trafficking. You are part of the movement that will help increase victim identification in our nation beyond 1%. You are part of a coalition that is on watch to end child sex trafficking in America.
In Module 1, you learned that child sex trafficking is not only a global epidemic, but also one that impacts our nation. Now, we want to help you understand what it looks like in our communities. To do that, it's important to throw out the stigmas that we associate with trafficking and learn the facts. First, an individual does not have to be physically moved to be sex trafficked. Remember, it involves them being sold for sex. In fact, only 4% of child sex trafficking cases involve abduction or kidnapping in America. 70% of sex trafficking victims are trafficked in the community where they live. Over the past few years, there has been a rise in the number of boy survivors identified. Now, 36% of sex trafficking victims in America are boys. As mentioned, child sex trafficking is rarely abduction. In actuality, 40% of American child sex trafficking victims are trafficked by a family member. The statistics show us that sex trafficking occurs in every zip code across America. It is colorless, it is classless, it is genderless. It affects hundreds of thousands of American children every year. To bring this to light, here are the words of American child sex trafficking survivors to give you a glimpse into their world.
When I was 8 years old, my sister had a house party with her older boyfriend. Her boyfriend slipped something into my soda, and that was the first night he sold me to his friends.
My mom died when I was 12 years old. My dad took me as his wife and started selling me to his friends so he could watch.
From the age of 7, my uncle trafficked me out of the back room of his store.
My mom is an addict. She sold me to feed her drug habit.
At age 13, I became my family's sole source of income when my grandmother started to sell me to pay the rent.
My mom worked 3 jobs to make ends meet. Our landlord lived next door and would babysit me. At 9 years old, he convinced me to play massage parlor. Eventually, he forced me to create child porn that he would later sell. He threatened to evict us if I told anyone.
I ran away at 14 years old from an abusive household. I met a nice woman as I wandered through the park, and she offered to let me stay with her. Little did I know that she was orchestrating the sale of runaway teens to wealthy buyers.
Most children are trafficked in the community they live and often know their trafficker before they are sold to buyers. 66% of children in America are trafficked by someone they know and trust, a family member, a neighbor, a romantic interest. A sex trafficker, like their victims, does not have a specific profile. A trafficker can be anyone: a teenage girl, a 60-year-old man, a gang member, a teacher, a coach, a local business owner, or even a pastor. Traffickers come in all ages, races, and professions. They form a complex, unhealthy relationship with their victim that usually escalates over time. The trafficker weaves a web of deception so the child lets his or her guard down, compromising and renegotiating some of their boundaries. The trafficker often engages in grooming, or identifying and then satisfying the victim's unmet needs, such as food, shelter, love, protection, or validation. Once a child is trafficked, it's usually the mental bondage that keeps them compliant. Traffickers threaten victims with violence or death to themselves or the people that they care about for disclosing the truth. Most kids won't even understand that they are being trafficked, and it is up to each of us to be on watch for signs of child sexual abuse and trafficking. Now that you understand more about who the victims and traffickers are, hopefully you see your unique position as the eyes and ears of our communities to report suspected trafficking.
Now that you have the foundational knowledge that sex trafficking in America can impact any age, race, gender, or socioeconomic background, and you understand that traffickers are more likely to be someone the child knows, we will do a deep dive into understanding how to spot and report sex trafficking. First, you will be trained on the common signs and indicators. Second, you will hear stories of how this can look when you are servicing a home or a business or just going through your day. Third, you will learn how to report suspected trafficking. To start, let's understand the signs and indicators of child trafficking that you may encounter throughout your day as you service homes and businesses. One of the first signs that you may notice is a child home during school hours. By itself, this does not indicate trafficking, but if a child is home during school hours and other indicators are present, then there may be reason to suspect child sex trafficking. A common indicator is also physical or verbal abuse. Trafficked children often experience multiple levels of abuse, not just sexual abuse, and physical abuse may present itself as bruises in various stages or healing of other injuries that have been left untreated or inappropriately treated. Often, a child who is being abused shows changes in body language towards specific individuals. For instance, the child may be very afraid or affectionate towards you, but you may notice a behavioral shift when a certain adult comes around the child. The child could become tense, avoid eye contact, and have a distinct change in posture. You may also notice that the adult may not leave the child alone in your presence or let that child answer any questions. Next are a few physical indicators. To start, the child may be dressed provocatively. A child may be wearing long sleeves in summer to cover up bruises, or a short dress in the dead of winter, or promiscuous clothing for their age or for being at home. Some traffickers will brand or tattoo their victims with their name or the word loyal, or a barcode or other symbols that reflect ownership. Regardless of whether a child is currently at home, you may still find evidence of child sex trafficking. For instance, you may find child-sized risque or sexual clothing. You may notice sex toys that are easily accessible to children or in proximity to children. Oftentimes, victims of sex trafficking are required to use sex toys in the creation of pornography or with buyers. Child pornography is illegal. Possession, distribution, and creation of child pornography is a felony. Child pornography is child sex trafficking because it is the commercial sale of a child for sexual purposes, and if you find child pornography, it must be reported directly to the authorities. Next, presence of drug paraphernalia could be evidence of sex trafficking. Drugs are either used as a coping mechanism by the victim or forced on the child by a trafficker to keep a child compliant. Finally, camera equipment is set up in odd spaces. Video or camera equipment set up in a bedroom, living room facing a couch or a child's bedroom, or a security camera installed in an unexpected place can suggest the creation of pornography. Individually, some of these signs will not suggest child sex trafficking, but anytime you find a few of these present in a home or a business, we suggest you report a tip, which will be covered in Module 4. Now that we have reviewed common signs and indicators of child sex trafficking that you may see while servicing a residential or a commercial property, let's understand what these really look like in real life. The following stories are based on actual child sex trafficking survivors who saw technicians coming and going in the time that they were trafficked. They have provided insight around what the technicians could have seen and what they could have reported. These are their stories.
Today, I am on a visit to a small farm, down a dirt road, which doesn't get much traffic. There are young teenage children, a boy and a girl, both about 15 or 16, at home in the middle of the day during school hours. They are quiet, very subdued, and don't make eye contact. The teenage girl is dressed in revealing clothes. Short shorts and a midriff tank top leave little to the imagination. It is early spring and too cool for such clothing to be comfortable. I ask her why they aren't in school. Her eyes dart to the man present, presumably her father, silently asking permission before she answers. We do church and school at home. I notice a picture of the girl dressed in a string bikini, sitting on the desk in the corner on full display. It seems strange parents would display such a sexually provocative photo of their teenage daughter, right next to the Bible on the desk. The sofa is made up as a bed. Clearly, someone sleeps there regularly. Pillows and blankets are laid out, waiting to be used again. The teenage boy retreats to his room and sits in front of a computer. I realize the boy is looking at pornography on the computer and avert my eyes. A Polaroid camera sits on the kitchen counter, and I see inappropriate photos of the girl beside it. The man reaches out and quickly puts them away when he realizes I've spotted them. The man sits down and motions the teenage girl to come sit on his lap. Something about the way he holds her makes me feel uncomfortable. I glance at a woman, I assume is her mother, and wait for her to object. She looks away and says nothing.
Ria's story is one example of sex trafficking hiding in plain sight in America. When she was 12 years old, her father took her as his wife, even though her mother still lived in the home. He forced Ria to have sex with him in the home, and then he would sell her to others so he could watch. He took her to a local motel or hotel where he would sell her while he filmed the act. After, he would sell the child pornography online. But it is not enough to just know Ria's story. We have to take a step beyond awareness to understand how to identify trafficked individuals like Ria and report suspected trafficking. Let's go through a few indicators that someone who is on watch may identify in Ria's story. Ria and her brother were at home during school hours with no real indicators that they were homeschooled by their parents. The camera equipment and the made-up bed in the living room suggest that someone in the family was being filmed for pornography. Not only was Ria dressed inappropriately for the weather, but she was also dressed in a provocative manner. Both Ria and her brother seemed disengaged and weren't allowed to speak for themselves. Finally, it is clear that pornography was normalized in the home, and that Ria and her father appeared to have an inappropriate relationship. As Ria says, "I was eventually rescued by my knight in a shiny Camaro." Her now husband recognized that she was being abused. Because he saw something and reported it to authorities, Ria was freed from her traffickers. Today, she is a leadership speaker, trainer, and author. She helps the world understand that your past doesn't have to define your future.
Every time I drive into public housing, my heart sinks. I see evidence of poverty, fatherless homes, drug addiction, and young kids left to fend for themselves. My eyes dart left and right, looking out for children running around the neighborhood or the group of teens loitering near the stop sign. I see adults clearly drugged up and kids with smaller kids on their hip as they walk through the neighborhood. I arrive at the row of houses and systematically start to move down the line, spraying the outside of the property. I come upon the party house from the back and see that they must have been at it again. The yard is strewn with joints, plastic cups, and food wrappers. Looks like a crazy night for the middle of the week. As I come around the front of the house, I am shocked at the large number of girls hanging out on the porch. The storm door opens and closes with the new girl appearing every few minutes. One of them hollers at the youngest, "Tiana, hurry up." As I get closer, Tiana and the girls make their way to the car parked in front. It looks like they are dressed for the club, but they're definitely too young. It's 1 p.m. on a Wednesday. Shouldn't they be in school? An older man hollers and honks from the driver's seat for them to hurry. The girls move quickly into action under his orders. When the girls see me, they almost shift into different characters as they begin yelling. "Hey mister, you come here for us? You better be ready to pay." As the father of 3 daughters, I look at these young girls and I wish I can tell them, your future can be so much more and your values is not tied to your body. I wave politely at them. The one her friends call Tiana turns towards me. We lock eyes, and I notice a look of desperation in her face. As she turns from me, I notice all the girls have the same tattoo branded across their arms. As they drive away, Tiana hollers out the window, "Bye, mama," to a woman standing nearby. The woman is dazed and drugged with a pregnant belly and a baby on her hip. She seems unfazed by the sight of girls being driven off like cattle to auction.
Tiana's story is one example of sex trafficking hiding in plain sight in America. But it is not enough just to know her story. We have to take a step beyond awareness to understand how to identify trafficked individuals like Tiana and feel equipped to report suspected trafficking. So let's go through a few of the indicators that someone who is on watch might identify in Tiana's story. For Tiana, her story was the same as all of the other girls in the neighborhood. Dad was gone, her mom was on drugs and struggled to keep a job, she was the oldest of 6 kids with the baby sister on the way, she was the caretaker of her home because her mom was always out or asleep. Tiana's nightmare began when she was 11, and her mom told her that it was time for her to start making money to help with the bills. Tiana had only one option presented to her, the one accepted by her peers, propped up by the music industry, glamorized on TV. She didn't want to, but she knew her mother wasn't going to pay for the food for the kids. So at 11 years old, she handed herself over to the most prominent pimp in the neighborhood, the one her other 6th grade friends went to when their mothers told them that it was time for them to start making money. Tiana accepted her reality and choked back the tears every time she was sold. No one was looking to help her because no one thought it was wrong. It was part of the cycle of poverty, drugs, and gangs, and letting her body be sold at a price was the only thing that would put food on the table for her siblings. Tiana was a young girl who lived in an impoverished community. She was home during school hours. She demonstrated over-sexualized behavior, which was condoned and encouraged by those around her. Her mom didn't seem impacted by the sight of her daughter's behavior and appeared to accept her offering herself for a price. When prostitution is normalized, child sex trafficking is often missed. However, anytime a child is engaging in commercial sex, regardless of whether there is evidence of force, fraud, or coercion, it is considered sex trafficking and it must be reported. As we mentioned in the beginning of the training, sex trafficking exists across America and can affect socio and economic backgrounds of all kinds.
I had been to this place for years. It was the nicest penthouse on my route. The owner, who I had only met a few times, was one of the most prominent businessmen in the city. He was well known and well respected, but I wasn't quite sure what to think. The penthouse wasn't his primary home, but he seemed to use it for out-of-town guests or his personal mistresses. I had seen many women over there, but they seemed to get younger and younger every time I visited. The first time I saw her, I thought maybe she was the man's granddaughter. She was young, too young. I would have guessed 13, but she was dressed in skimpy clothes. She seemed a bit confused, dazed. I noticed bruises on her arm and could tell she had been hurt. It was a weekday when most children would be in school. I asked her name and she hesitated, then gave me a name, Maddie, as though it was the only one she could think of. I went about servicing the penthouse and noticed a number of pill bottles on the counters with no label and sex toys and condoms around the bedroom. As I continued working, the doorbell rang and the young girl was startled out of her daze. As she walked to open the door, I could see her shaking. At the door was a man who was not the penthouse owner but his son. The young girl let the man in and looked at me, then looked down as though she was embarrassed. The man hardly noticed me and headed straight to the bedroom. I left that day with an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. 4 months later, I returned to the penthouse. This time there were more pill bottles, and the young girl was more dazed and barely dressed and didn't seem to care. She seemed more like a shell of herself than before. I tried asking the young girl questions to see if she needed help, but she talked about the man who owned the penthouse as though he saved her and took care of her. She talked about how she came from a poor neighborhood and he picked her. All she had to do was be nice to the men he sent to the penthouse.
Sarah's story is one example of sex trafficking hiding in plain sight in America. She ran away from a sexually abusive home when she was 12 and quickly found herself in the care of a woman who swore to protect her, and she did for 2 months until she sold Sarah to her highest paying client. The businessman who bought Sarah told her that she could buy anything she wanted, but her job was to have sex with the men he sent to the penthouse. When she resisted, she was beaten. When she did as she was told, she was given pills for the pain. The buyers were his sons, his friends, and other businessmen. By 13 years old, Sarah was a commodity used as a bargaining tool for the businessmen to close deals and bribe others. But it is not enough to just know her story. We have to take a step beyond awareness to understand how to identify trafficked individuals like Sarah and report suspected trafficking. Let's go through a few of the indicators that someone who is on watch may identify in Sarah's story. Sarah was at the penthouse during school hours on multiple occasions. On the technician's first visit, she seemed scared and confused, and on subsequent visits, she seemed to be on drugs and a bit dazed and detached. But each time she had bruises that she tried to hide. There were also sex toys and pill bottles laying around the penthouse. Sarah's story didn't seem to fit the circumstances, but she seemed afraid to tell the truth. From penthouses to public housing, each survivor's story is different. Therefore, you will usually see some, but not all, the indicators of child sex trafficking while performing your job. Nevertheless, you should always report suspected trafficking. You will never be found at fault for making a tip. So when in doubt, just report. The majority of survivors of sex trafficking are not going to identify themselves. While there are many reasons for this, one of the most common is trauma bonding with their trafficker. Trauma bonding is a powerful emotional attachment that a victim has to their trafficker, stemming from power imbalances and intermittent good and bad treatment. Another common reason survivors may not self-identify is when they have asked for help previously, no one believed them. Neither of these things should change our response to suspected trafficking. As you have seen throughout the training, trafficking presents itself in many different ways, and we all need to be on watch to help eradicate sex trafficking. First and foremost, do not talk to, approach, or engage a trafficker. This could present significant risk or severe beatings or even death for the victims being trafficked. It could also put you in danger if the trafficker feels you're a threat to their business. You may encounter a suspected trafficking situation or an active trafficking situation. Both are important to report. Anytime you encounter a situation where you suspect sex trafficking, you should report a tip to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which can be done via calling 1-888-373-7888 or texting help or info to be free. If you witness an active trafficking situation, you should call law enforcement immediately. An active situation is where you can provide actionable information to law enforcement, like witnessing child abuse, in conjunction with other indicators of sex trafficking as previously reviewed throughout the training. When you see the signs and report sex trafficking, it empowers law enforcement to do their job more effectively by identifying trafficking patterns, documenting suspicious activity, ultimately leading to increased victim identification. Here it is again. If someone needs help immediately, call 911. For a suspected trafficking situation, report a tip to the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888 or text HELP to be free. Ultimately, you are never going to be at fault for reporting a trafficking situation, regardless of the outcome. But you will always wonder about that individual if you don't make the call. Like the Attorney General of Utah, Sean Reyes, said, "We would rather go through 10 cases and have all 10 of them not turn out to be human trafficking than miss one case." Next, you will learn about the path forward for a survivor once they have been identified.
In order for survivors to escape the cycle of victimization, they need programs and people that help empower their path to freedom. Simply escaping a trafficker does not equate to freedom, and for years, efforts have been made to raise awareness of sex trafficking, make laws to prevent it, and rescue those enslaved, but the story cannot end at rescue. Safe House networks are a comprehensive solution to survivor care that works to assist a survivor from the time of escape to help them reintegrate back into society. A safe house is not a shelter. A safe house is a home where survivors can receive care through therapy, medical attention, education, life skill training. A safe house network is everything from emergency housing to long-term restorative care to transitional opportunities. It is creating a continuum of care, empowering a survivor's path to freedom. Safe houses are places where those who have been treated as a commodity and nothing more can start rebuilding their identity and their confidence. Safe houses allow survivors to discover who they are, what they're good at, what brings them joy. The basic parts of personality and identity are often robbed from survivors. Safe houses allow them to get those things back. Without restorative care, most victims never testify against their trafficker. And testifying is an essential part of the prosecution process, and victims' impact statements are valuable for the judge during sentencing. But beyond that, the ability to testify can help a survivor feel as though they've taken control of his or her story. They're getting their body back, but they're getting justice for his or herself. To eradicate sex trafficking, we must increase victim identification, provide robust treatment to those who have been victimized, and increase prosecution of traffickers and provide preventative education for children in at-risk populations. So here are a few ways that you can get involved. First, if you would like, you can donate at safehouseproject.org/donate. Learn more about what sex trafficking looks like in communities across America by taking our On Watch training at IamOnWatch.org. Volunteer, learn more at safehouseproject.org. Our goal is to spark change in our nation by igniting a fire in each of you to be on watch to spot, report, and prevent trafficking. You can prevent future generations from exploitation. You can be part of ending sex trafficking in America. So thank you for becoming On Watch certified. Please fill out your form below and receive your On Watch decal. We encourage you to place it on your truck, show your community, and show them that you are on watch to spot, report, and prevent trafficking.